Just before we jump right into the story, if you like the video and subscribe, they would be supporting us a lot. Are you ready? Let's get started. The southern heat hung thick over Charleston's historic district as summer blazed through the cobblestone streets and antebellum mansions. In the shadow of rainbow rose pastel houses, two sisters grew up as different as sweet tea and bourbon, Hope and Victoria Sterling. Hope, 23 years old, possessed a heart as pure as her name suggested. Her warm brown eyes reflected a genuine kindness that endeared her to everyone in their close-knit community. She worked as a kindergarten teacher at the local elementary school, spending her evenings tutoring underprivileged children for free. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her modest sundresses never competed with her radiant smile. Victoria, a year younger but infinitely more calculating, was everything Hope wasn't. Stunning like a southern belle from a magazine cover, with platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that could hypnotize any man, she had learned early to use her beauty as a weapon. While Hope studied education, Victoria spent her days at high-end salons and boutiques in downtown Charleston, always hunting for the next opportunity to climb the social ladder. Robert Sterling, a weathered man of 55 with graying temples, had worked his entire life as a property manager for Charleston's elite families. His wife, Carol, a petite but strong-willed woman, shared his growing obsession with money that had developed during years of financial struggle in their youth. "Look here, Bobby," Carol said one sweltering afternoon as they sat on the wraparound porch of their modest Victorian home, sipping sweet tea. "Victoria's got everything it takes to marry well. She's beautiful, knows how to behave in high society, not like Hope, always getting dirty with those kids." Robert nodded, watching Hope through the screen door as she helped her mother fold laundry. "You're right, honey. Victoria could be our ticket out of this life. But she needs to find the right man." It was as if fate had been listening to their words. Alexander Blackwood arrived in Charleston on a Tuesday in September, when the oppressive summer heat had finally begun to break and the air smelled of magnolia blossoms and Spanish moss. At 32, he owned a chain of luxury hotels stretching from Miami to the Outer Banks. His fortune, inherited from his grandfather and multiplied through his business acumen, made him one of the most eligible bachelors on the East Coast. Tall and athletic, with dark hair always perfectly styled and a smile that had graced business magazine covers, Alexander had everything any woman could want. But there was something in his steel-gray eyes, a depth that spoke of loneliness, of searches that had yielded no answers. He came to Charleston to oversee the renovation of his newest acquisition, the historic Magnolia Grand Hotel on King Street. He stayed at the Charleston Harbor Resort, where Robert worked as the general manager. It was in the hotel's elegant lobby, decorated with crystal chandeliers and antique Charleston furniture, that Alexander first encountered the Sterling sisters. Victoria arrived that day in a red sundress that hugged every curve, her heels clicking against the marble floors, wearing a smile calculated to perfection. She had heard rumors about the wealthy hotel mogul and couldn't let the opportunity slip by. "Daddy," she said in her sweetest southern drawl, "I brought you your favorite lunch." But her eyes never left Alexander, who was discussing renovation plans with the hotel's architect near the grand staircase. Robert, immediately understanding his daughter's intentions, approached the businessman. "Mr. Blackwood, I'd like you to meet my daughter Victoria. She's studying business administration and knows Charleston like the back of her hand." Alexander, ever the gentleman, shook Victoria's perfectly manicured hand. He was immediately struck by her stunning beauty, but something about her too-perfect smile put him on guard. Nevertheless, when she offered to show him the best restaurants in the city, he accepted out of politeness. Hope arrived 5 minutes later, caught in a sudden afternoon thunderstorm. Her teacher's outfit was soaked, her ponytail disheveled, and her simple flats splashed with puddle water. She was rushing to pick up some files her father had forgotten at home. "Daddy," Your documents, she called from the entrance, not noticing the elegance of the setting or Alexander's presence. When she looked up and saw the stranger, she blushed deeply. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were with someone. Alexander looked at her and felt something different. In those warm brown eyes, he saw pure honesty, a light that contrasted dramatically with the artificial sparkle he'd perceived in Victoria. Hope was beautiful in a completely different way. Natural, authentic, real. Don't worry about it, Alexander said with a genuine smile. I'm Alexander Blackwood. Hope Sterling, she replied, wiping a raindrop from her cheek with the back of her hand. Nice to meet you. In that moment, something magical happened. Time seemed to stop as they looked into each other's eyes. Alexander felt he had found something he'd been searching for years without knowing it. Victoria, watching the scene with eyes trained to detect competition, felt a stab of jealousy that surprised her. How could this millionaire look at her disheveled, simple sister that way? Hope, you're soaking wet, Victoria said with a forced smile. You should go home and change before you catch cold. You're right, Hope murmured, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood. When she left, Alexander stood staring at the door for several seconds, lost in thoughts he couldn't explain. That evening, in the living room of the Sterling family's small Victorian house, decorated with family photos and Southern heirlooms, the plan that would change everything was born. Victoria paced back and forth like a caged panther, her heels marking a nervous rhythm against the hardwood floors. He's perfect, Daddy. Alexander Blackwood is exactly what we've been waiting for. Robert smoked a cigarette by the window, looking out at Charleston's twinkling lights in the distance. Are you sure you can win him over? I saw how he looked at your sister today. Please. Victoria let out a dismissive laugh. Hope? She's a small-town teacher with no sophistication whatsoever. Alexander noticed my beauty immediately. I just need time to seduce him completely. Carol, knitting in her favorite rocking chair, looked up. But honey, what about love? Don't you want to be happy in your marriage? Victoria stopped and looked at her mother with cold eyes that contrasted sharply with her angelic beauty. Mama, love doesn't pay the bills. Alexander Blackwood is worth over $50 million. With American marriage laws, if I marry him, I automatically become entitled to half of everything he owns. Robert crushed his cigarette in the ashtray. And then what? You're going to stay married to him forever? Of course not. Victoria smiled in a way that would have chilled anyone who truly knew her. I marry him, sign the papers, and after a few months, I file for divorce. I claim irreconcilable differences, maybe even emotional abuse. With a good lawyer, I can walk away with millions in settlement, plus alimony. Carol dropped her knitting. Victoria, that's fraud. It's smart strategy, her daughter corrected. Thousands of women worldwide have used their beauty to improve their financial situation. Why should I be any different? Robert approached his younger daughter, taking her hands in his. Sweetheart, if this works, our family will never have money problems again. We could buy our own mansion, start a business. Exactly, Daddy. But I need your help. Victoria looked at her parents intensely. Alexander is intelligent. I can't seem too interested or he'll get suspicious. I need you to help me create the perfect circumstances for him to fall madly in love with me. For the next 2 hours, the three Sterlings meticulously planned every detail. Robert would use his position at the hotel to inform Victoria about Alexander's schedule and preferences. Carol would keep Hope busy and away from any accidental encounters with the businessman. What if Hope gets suspicious? Carol asked. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Hope is too naive to understand this kind of strategy. Besides, she's completely absorbed in her students and her books. She's no threat. What Victoria didn't know was that Hope had returned home early that evening because she'd felt sick during her evening tutoring session, and had heard every word of the conversation from the garden, where she'd been watering her mother's flowers before coming inside. Hidden behind the magnolia tree, with her heart pounding like a drum, Hope felt as if the world had turned upside down. Her sister, whom she had admired and protected all her life, was planning to destroy an innocent man's life for money. And most painful of all, her parents were completely on board with the plan. Tears ran silently down her cheeks as she listened to her own family conspire to commit what was nothing short than matrimonial fraud. But there was something else that hurt her deeply. She couldn't deny that Alexander Blackwood had made an extraordinary impression on her during those brief minutes at the hotel. When she finally managed to enter the house unseen and locked herself in her small room, Hope sat on her bed with trembling hands. On her nightstand was her favorite photograph, she and Victoria hugging during the town's Azalea Festival the previous year, smiling genuinely. How had her family reached this point? When had money become more important than honesty and true love? But more importantly, what could she do to prevent Alexander Blackwood from falling into the trap they had set for him? That night, Hope couldn't sleep. Among the shadows of her room, lit only by moonlight filtering through her white curtains, she made the most difficult decision of her life. No matter the personal cost, no matter if her own family hated her for it, she had to save Alexander Blackwood from the betrayal that awaited him. What she didn't know was that her decision would trigger a series of events that would transform not only her life, but also her understanding of love, family, and what it really means to do the right thing. Destiny had begun to weave its complex web, and the Sterling sisters were about to discover that some decisions change everything forever. The following days unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Victoria managed to accidentally run into Alexander at the hotel, at restaurants, and at Charleston's most elegant venues. She wore different outfits every day, each more spectacular than the last. Her conversation was filled with sophisticated cultural references, business knowledge she had frantically studied at night, and a charming personality she had polished to perfection. Alexander, being a gentleman, responded to her attention with courtesy, but Hope noticed something in his eyes when he looked at her sister. It was admiration, yes, but not the kind of deep connection she had felt when their gazes met that first day in the rain. One afternoon, while organizing books in her classroom, Hope saw through the window how Alexander and Victoria strolled through Charleston's historic district. Her sister laughed exaggeratedly, touched Alexander's arm with calculated familiarity, and looked at him with eyes that promised entire worlds. From a distance, Alexander seemed to enjoy the company, but something in his body language suggested a reserve, an invisible wall he maintained around his heart. That evening, during family dinner, Victoria couldn't contain her excitement. "He invited me to dinner tomorrow at the most exclusive restaurant in the city," she announced, serving shrimp and grits with hands that trembled slightly from excitement. "I think he's starting to feel something real for me." Robert raised his glass of sweet tea. "Let's toast to our future millionaire." Hope felt nauseous. "Don't you think you're moving too fast? You've barely known each other for a week." Victoria shot her an icy look. "Sister, when you know what you want, you don't waste time. Besides, Alexander is a man of the world. He's used to making quick decisions." "But marriage is different," Hope insisted, desperate to make her family see reason. "It's about love, real commitment, building a life together." "Enough, Hope." Carol exploded, slamming her palm on the table. "Your sister has a golden opportunity, and you're always discouraging her. Are you jealous?" The question hit like lightning in the room. Hope felt breathless. Was she jealous? The truth was complicated. She decided to seek out Alexander to warn him, subtly, about her sister's true intentions. She knew Alexander had breakfast every morning at 8 o'clock sharp on the hotel's terrace. She arrived early, asked the manager for permission to clean the terrace tables, lying that it was extra work, and waited. Alexander arrived punctually, dressed in a light blue shirt that brought out his grey eyes and khaki pants that gave him a relaxed but elegant appearance. "Good morning, Hope," he said when he approached his usual table. "Good morning, Alexander. What are you doing here so early?" "Part-time work," she explained, nervously cleaning a table that was already spotless. To help finance school supplies for my students." Alexander sat down, inviting her with a gesture to continue the conversation. "You're a teacher, right? Victoria mentioned you work with children." "Yes, at Jefferson Elementary. They're wonderful kids, but many come from families with financial difficulties." Hope took a deep breath, preparing for what she was about to say. "Alexander, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. What are you really looking for in a woman?" She had chosen a pale pink dress that made her look angelic and innocent, with a subtle but suggestive neckline. Her shoes were high enough to elongate her legs, but comfortable enough to run if her plan required it. Robert and Carol helped her review every detail of the plan during lunch. "Remember," Robert said, "Charlotte knows to serve plenty of alcohol. Men make more impulsive decisions when they've been drinking." "And you have the emergency phone number," Carol added. "A friend of your father's will call exactly at 10 o'clock pretending to be a kidnapper." Victoria nodded, checking her purse for the 10th time. "The plan is perfect. It's easier than I thought." With trembling fingers, Hope took photos of the most incriminating messages. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt her chest, but for the first time in weeks, she knew exactly what she had to do. Alexander Blackwood deserved to know the truth, and she was going to tell him that very night. 3 weeks had passed since Alexander arrived in Charleston, and Victoria had deployed a complete arsenal of Southern charm. Each encounter was meticulously planned: casual appearances in the hotel lobby during Alexander's breakfast, invitations to the most exclusive venues in the city, seemingly spontaneous conversations about art, music, and literature that she had obsessively studied during the nights. About your hotel in Savannah. The Magnolia Room, with its crystal chandeliers and antique mahogany furnishings, was the setting for their 5th date. Victoria wore a black silk dress she had bought with money her parents had saved for months. Her pearl earrings hung delicately, framing her face that had been made up with the precision of a work of art. "Alexander," she said, leaning slightly over the table while the waiter served them bourbon and sweet tea, "I'm fascinated by how you describe your hotels. Southern Living magazine called it a symphony of contemporary Southern design." "That's pure poetry, darling." Alexander gently withdrew his hand to take his glass of bourbon. Hope caught the gesture and felt a strange mixture of relief and concern. "Victoria, you're very flattering," Alexander said, "but tell me about you. What are your real passions? What makes you genuinely happy?" The question caught Victoria off guard. She had practiced answers about art, culture, and business, but had never really reflected on her own authentic passions. "Well, I like fashion, of course. And traveling. I dream of seeing Paris, Milan." Her voice trailed off because even to her it sounded superficial. Hope, cleaning a nearby table, saw how Alexander nodded politely, but his gaze drifted toward the window, as if he were searching for something deeper that he wasn't finding in that conversation. It was then that the accident happened. A little boy, no more than 6 years old, ran into the restaurant chasing a stray kitten. In his desperate chase, he tripped and hit a table hard, hurting his knee and starting to cry inconsolably. Victoria looked at the scene with disgust. Where are that child's parents? This is unacceptable in a place like this. But Hope reacted instinctively. She dropped the tray she was carrying and ran to the child, kneeling beside him without caring that her uniform got stained. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said in a soft voice, carefully examining the wound. "It's just a scrape. Let's clean it up and you'll be good as new." Alexander watched, fascinated, as Hope took a clean napkin from her apron and began gently cleaning the child's wound, speaking to him in a low voice to calm him down. "What's your name, little one?" Hope asked. "Tommy," the boy sobbed. "Tommy, what a strong name. You know what, Tommy? My daddy's name is Robert, and when I was little and got hurt, he told me that brave kids' wounds heal faster. Are you brave, Tommy?" The boy nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. Hope smiled and took a small photo of a lighthouse from her pocket. "Look, this is the Morris Island Lighthouse. It's been protecting Charleston for over 100 years. When your knee hurts, just think about how strong and brave that lighthouse is, okay?" Tommy took the photo with reverence and nodded solemnly. At that moment, the child's mother appeared, a young woman dressed modestly, obviously distressed. "Tommy, I've been looking for you all over the market." She turned to Hope. "Thank you so much, miss. I work in the kitchen at the hotel across the street and he escaped during my break." "Don't worry," Hope smiled, helping the child stand up. "Little ones are like butterflies, always exploring the world." She handed the mother some clean napkins and explained how to care for the wound. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off the scene. When mother and child left, Hope returned to her work as if nothing had happened, but Alexander stood up from his table. "Excuse me," he told Victoria, "I'll be right back." He approached Hope, who was picking up pieces of broken plates from her tray. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. Hope looked up, surprised. "What was?" "Your compassion. The way you cared for that child. Not many people would have reacted like that." Hope blushed. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Alexander said firmly. "Believe me, not everyone." It was the same look he'd had that first day at the hotel when he met Hope. That night, at the Sterling house, Victoria paced frantically through the living room. "There's something different about Alexander," she told her parents. "He's more distant, more reserved. And today at the restaurant." "What happened today?" Robert asked, setting aside his newspaper. "Hope was working there," Victoria spat. "And Alexander saw her help a child who had gotten hurt. I saw him looking at her the same way as that first day." Carol frowned. "Hope was working at the Magnolia Room?" A cold smile drew across Victoria's lips. "I'm going to create a situation where he feels obligated to protect me, to be my hero. Men like Alexander have a savior complex. I just need to become the perfect damsel in distress." What none of them knew was that Hope had arrived home early again and was listening from the kitchen while making tea to calm her nerves after the encounter with Alexander. This time, however, there was something different in how Hope processed the information. It was no longer just shock or sadness. It was pure determination. Alexander Blackwood was a good man who deserved to know the truth before it was too late. Alexander met Charlotte's most influential friends, discussed business with local entrepreneurs, and danced several pieces with Victoria, who pressed closer to him increasingly intimately. "You're a natural dancer," Victoria murmured against his ear as they moved to a slow blues rhythm. "Is there anything you can't do?" Alexander smiled, but there was something in his expression Victoria couldn't completely decipher. "Victoria, may I ask you something?" "Of course, my love," she replied, using the endearment for the first time. "Why do I feel like you're constantly trying to impress me? I want to get to know the real Victoria, not the version you think I want to see." The question caught Victoria completely off guard. For a moment, her perfect mask cracked, and Alexander saw something in her eyes that disturbed him: panic. "I don't know what you mean," she laughed nervously. "I'm always myself with you." But Alexander had already seen enough. He had built a business empire by reading people, detecting lies, identifying hidden motives. And at that moment, he realized he had been ignoring all the warning signs Victoria had been sending. It was then that her phone rang. It was exactly 10 o'clock when Victoria's phone began to ring. She looked at the screen and pretended not to recognize the number, though she knew perfectly well it was her father's accomplice. "Should I answer?" she asked Alexander with an expression of innocent curiosity. "Of course," he replied, watching her reaction carefully. Victoria answered with a cheerful voice. "Hello." The voice on the other end was deep, threatening, but Alexander noticed that Victoria didn't seem genuinely surprised. "Victoria Sterling, we know where you are. You have something that belongs to us." "What? Who is this? I don't understand." Victoria began her performance, but Alexander, trained in detecting false negotiations in the business world, immediately noticed her surprise was exaggerated. "You have 1 hour to come alone to the abandoned warehouse on Highway 17, mile marker 23. If you don't come, or if you bring someone with you, your family will pay the consequences." Alexander watched Victoria tremble with fear, but there was something artificial in the way her hands shook, as if she were following a script. "No, please, there must be a mistake." Victoria pleaded into the phone. 1 hour. Come alone." The line went dead. Victoria let herself fall into a chair, bringing her hands to her face in a perfectly theatrical gesture. "Alexander, I don't know what to do." That voice sounded so dangerous. Alexander approached her, but instead of the blind concern Victoria expected, there was a calculating coldness in his eyes. "Victoria, is there something you're not telling me? Some problem with your family? Debts?" "No. I don't know what those people are talking about. Alexander, I'm scared. What am I going to do?" "We are calling the police immediately," Alexander said, taking out his phone. "No." Victoria screamed, perhaps too quickly. "They said if I brought someone or called the police, they'd hurt my family." In her purse, she carried the photographs she had taken of Victoria's messages, printed at an internet cafe downtown. Her hands were trembling, but her determination was unshakable. When she arrived at the plantation entrance, the security guard looked at her suspiciously. "Excuse me, miss, are you invited to the party?" "I'm Hope Sterling, Victoria's sister. I need to speak urgently with Alexander Blackwood." The guard checked his list. "I don't see your name here." "Please," Hope pleaded, "it's a family emergency. I just need 5 minutes." After several minutes of negotiation, the guard allowed her to enter, but warned her that if she caused any problems, she would be escorted out immediately. Hope made them up. "Really?" Hope said, taking out her phone. "Because I also have video of your performance from 5 minutes ago, when you pretended to receive the threatening call." Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, processing the magnitude of the deception. When he opened them, He looked at Victoria with an expression she would never forget. "Is it true?" he asked with dangerously calm voice. Victoria knew she had lost, but decided to try one last desperate deception. "Alexander, I can explain everything. Yes, maybe at first I thought about the economic advantages, but then I really fell in love with you." "At first." Alexander let out a bitter laugh. "Victoria, we've known each other for 3 weeks. By exposing them, you hurt yourself too." Hope looked at Victoria, who was crying tears that this time seemed genuine, though it was impossible to know if they were from repentance or frustration at being discovered. "Sometimes doing the right thing hurts," Hope said. "But the pain of doing wrong lasts forever." As if summoned by some invisible force, Robert and Carol appeared at that moment, obviously worried because Victoria hadn't called to confirm the plan was working. "Victoria, why haven't you?" Robert stopped abruptly when he saw the expressions on everyone's faces. "Daddy," Hope said firmly, "Alexander already knows the truth about the plan." Carol brought her hands to her chest. "What truth? What are you talking about?" "Mom, please. Stop pretending." Hope approached her parents, her heart breaking but not regretting her decision. "Alexander knows about the fake kidnapping, about the divorce plans, about everything." Robert looked at Alexander with an expression mixing shame and defiance. "Mr. Blackwood, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Alexander said coldly. "You raised a daughter who saw me as a walking bank account. You planned to use lies and emotional manipulation to steal my money. What more do I need to know?" "It wasn't stealing," Carol protested. "It was going to be a legal marriage." "A marriage based on lies with the premeditated intention of divorce," Alexander corrected. "In many places, that's called matrimonial fraud." Victoria, who had been crying silently, finally exploded. "This is all your fault, Hope. You had to ruin the only chance our family had to escape poverty. At the cost of destroying an innocent man's life." Hope shouted back. "At the cost of turning us into criminals. We were a family." Victoria cried. "You were supposed to support me." "Families support each other to do good, not to do evil," Hope replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you, Victoria, but I can't help you hurt other people." Robert approached Alexander with his hands extended in a gesture of supplication. "Mr. Blackwood, we are poor people. When we saw the opportunity to change our destiny by becoming con artists." Alexander interrupted him. "Mr. Sterling, I come from a humble family too. My grandfather started by selling hot dogs on the street. But it would never have occurred to him to steal or deceive to get ahead." "We weren't going to hurt you," Carol insisted. "Victoria would have made you happy during the marriage. By pretending to love me while planning to divorce me," Alexander said incredulously. "Do you really not understand how twisted that is?" It was then that Charlotte and several guests approached, drawn by the commotion. Charlotte, who had been aware of Victoria's plan, paled when she realized everything had been exposed. "Alexander," Charlotte said nervously, "I think there's a misunderstanding." "Were you involved too?" Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer from the guilty expression on Charlotte's face. Victoria asked me to help organize a romantic party. I didn't know about the rest." Hope looked at her with disappointment. "Charlotte, I heard Victoria talking to you on the phone about the fake kidnapping." Charlotte lowered her head, unable to deny the accusation. Alexander looked around the group of conspirators and felt a mixture of nausea and sadness. "Do you know what's the most pathetic thing about all this?" he said finally. If Victoria had been honest with me, if she had told me about your family's financial difficulties, I would have been happy to help. But instead, you chose deception and manipulation. Alexander turned to Hope, who stood slightly apart from the group, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Hope," he said, approaching her, "can I talk to you privately?" She nodded, and they walked together toward Charlotte's rose garden, away from the drama unfolding on the main patio. "Why did you really do it?" Alexander asked when they were alone. "And don't tell me it was just because it was right. There was something more." Hope took a deep breath, knowing the moment for absolute honesty had arrived. "Because I fell in love with you," she admitted, looking at the roses so she wouldn't have to see his reaction. "From the first moment we met in the rain, I knew you were different. And when I saw your kindness with the child at the restaurant, when I heard how you talked about looking for true love, I couldn't let my family hurt you." Alexander remained silent for a long moment, processing her words. "Do you know when I knew something was wrong with Victoria?" he asked finally. Hope looked at him, curious. "It was when I saw you care for that child at the restaurant. I saw the difference between real compassion and acting. Victoria is beautiful, intelligent, charming, but everything about her felt like a performance. With you, everything feels real." "Alexander," Hope whispered, "I don't want you to think I did this to win you for myself. I did it because it was right, regardless of the consequences." "I know," he said, moving closer. "And that's exactly why I know my feelings for you are real." Hope looked up, surprised. "Your feelings for me?" "Hope, I've been thinking about you since that first day. Every conversation with Victoria made me wish I was talking to you instead. Every moment I spent with her, I wondered what you were doing." Tears began streaming down Hope's cheeks. "But my family will never accept this. After what happened. My family taught me to value honesty, kindness, and integrity above all else," Alexander said, taking her hands. "You have all those qualities and more. My family is going to love you." "And my family?" Hope asked, looking toward the patio where her parents and sister still stood. "Your family will have to learn to live with the consequences of their decisions," Alexander said gently. "But you're not responsible for their choices, Hope. Only for yours." "Alexander, what's going to happen now?" He smiled, the first genuine smile he had shown all evening. "Now, if you want, we are going to get to know each other for real. No lies, no hidden plans, no agendas. Just two people who feel something real for each other." "Are you sure?" she asked with a trembling voice. "After everything that's happened?" "Hope," Alexander said, bringing his face close to hers, "what happened showed me exactly what kind of woman you are. You're brave, honest, compassionate, and strong. You're everything I've been looking for." And with those words, he kissed her softly under the stars, while the scent of magnolias filled the night air. When they returned to the main patio, they found the Sterling family in full crisis. Victoria had stopped crying and now looked at Alexander and Hope with a coldness that was almost palpable. "So this is what you wanted," she said to Hope. "Destroy my plan so you could have Alexander for yourself." "Victoria," Hope said sadly, "I didn't destroy your plan. Your plan destroyed itself because it was based on lies. It was my chance for a better life. There were 1,000 ways to have a better life without hurting anyone." Hope shouted back. "You could have studied, worked, built something real. Like you, right?" Victoria smiled bitterly. "Living in poverty, teaching kids who will never give you anything in return. Those kids give me more than you could ever understand," Hope said firmly. "They give me purpose, joy, the satisfaction of making a real difference in the world. Alexander watched the exchange with fascination. Even in this moment of confrontation, Hope defended not her own virtue, but the value of the work she loved. Robert approached Alexander one last time. "Mr. Blackwood, I know we have no right to ask you anything, but are you going to report us to the police?" Alexander considered the question carefully. "Mr. Sterling, you've caused me emotional pain and wasted my time, but technically you haven't stolen any money from me. I'm not going to press charges, but I want you to understand something clearly. If you ever approach me or Hope with malicious intentions, I won't hesitate to take legal action." Hope. Carol looked at her older daughter with a hurt expression. "Are you really going to choose a stranger over your own family?" "Mom," Hope said with a broken voice, "I'm not abandoning you. But I'm also not going to let you blackmail me into being an accomplice to things that are wrong." "Then you're no longer our daughter," Robert declared coldly. The words hit Hope like a physical punch, but Alexander immediately put his arm around her. "Mr. Sterling," Alexander said with a controlled but authoritative voice, "you just disowned the only person in your family with true moral integrity. Someday you're going to regret those words. Let's go." Carol shouted to Victoria and her husband. "We have nothing more to do here." As the Sterling family walked toward the exit, Victoria turned back one last time toward Hope. "I hope you're very happy," she said, but there was poison in her voice. "I hope it was worth destroying your own family." "Victoria," Hope called, tears streaming down her face, "you'll always be my sister. When you decide to change, when you want to do things right, I'll be here for you." Victoria stopped for a moment, and for an instant, her mask cracked and Alexander saw a young, scared woman who had made terrible decisions. But the moment passed, and Victoria kept walking without looking back. The historic St. Michael's Church in downtown Charleston was decorated with white magnolias and southern jasmine. It was an intimate ceremony with just 40 guests, but each person present had been carefully chosen for their significance in the couple's lives. Hope walked down the aisle wearing her grandmother's wedding dress, altered with lace she had embroidered herself during the long nights of preparation. She didn't have an elaborate veil or expensive jewelry, but her natural beauty radiated a happiness that illuminated the entire church. Alexander waited at the altar, dressed in a classic Southern gentleman's morning coat that he had made especially for the occasion. When he saw Hope walking toward him, he felt his heart stop at the pure perfection of the moment. The guests included Hope's students, who had insisted on singing during the ceremony, Alexander's closest employees, some genuine friends they had made in Charleston, and surprisingly, Alexander's family, who had traveled from Atlanta to meet the woman who had captured their son's heart. Eleanor Blackwood, Alexander's mother, had embraced Hope from the first moment she met her. "Son," she had whispered to Alexander during the rehearsal dinner, "this woman has a beautiful soul. You finally found someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have." Pastor Williams, who had baptized Hope as a baby, officiated the ceremony. When it came time for vows, both Alexander and Hope had decided to write their own. "Hope," Alexander began, his clear voice carrying throughout the church, "a year ago I came to Charleston looking to expand my business, but I was really searching for something I didn't even know I needed. You taught me that true love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who is perfectly honest. You saved me not just from deception, but from an empty life. I promise to love you, respect you, and support your dreams every day of my life." Hope took a deep breath before speaking, with tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. "Alexander, when I decided to tell you the truth about my family's plan, I didn't do it expecting to win you for myself. I did it because I believed you deserved to know the truth. But in the process of saving you, you saved me too. You saved me from a family that valued money over honesty, and gave me a new family based on true love. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, and your best friend forever." When Pastor Williams pronounced the words, "You may kiss the bride," Alexander took Hope's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made the entire congregation sigh. The Hope Blackwood Learning Center stood beautiful on the outskirts of Charleston, with its walls painted in bright colors and gardens full of flowers that the students themselves tended. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Alexander was working in his home office while Hope read in the garden. They heard the sound of a car approaching down their gravel driveway. Hope looked up from her book and felt her heart stop. It was a car she recognized, her father's old blue sedan. Alexander came out of the house when he heard the engine stop. They watched Robert get out of the car, visibly aged, with completely gray hair and trembling hands. Behind him came Carol, equally worn by time and, apparently, by worry. But the third person who got out of the car was the one who most impacted Hope, Victoria, but not the beautiful, confident Victoria she remembered. This Victoria had deep dark circles under her eyes, had lost weight unhealthily, and her eyes had lost all the sparkle that had once characterized them. "Hope," Robert said with a broken voice, can we talk to you?" Alexander immediately approached his wife, taking her hand in support. "Do you want me to stay with you?" Hope nodded, grateful for his constant presence. "Dad, Mom, Victoria, please come in." They sat on the porch of the house, under the shade of the magnolia trees Hope had planted. A tense silence filled the air until Robert finally spoke. "Hope, we've come to ask for your forgiveness." The words came out with difficulty, as if each syllable caused him physical pain. "And to tell you what's happened to us since that night," Carol added, wiping her eyes with a worn tissue. Hope looked at her sister, who remained silent, staring at the ground. Victoria looked up, and Hope saw something in her eyes that had never been there before, genuine humility. "Sister," Victoria whispered, "I've come to ask for your forgiveness, but also to thank you." "Thank me?" "For saving me from becoming a complete monster," Victoria said, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "Hope, after that night, I tried to continue with my life as if nothing had happened. I looked for other rich men, attempted similar plans." Alexander felt a chill, but kept his expression neutral. "But every time I tried to deceive someone else, I heard your voice in my head telling me to do the right thing. Every time I lied, I saw your face when you confronted me that night. I couldn't continue." Carol leaned forward. "Honey, the last 3 years have been very difficult for us. Without the money we expected to get through the plan, we had to face our real financial problems. We lost the house," Robert admitted. "I had to leave my job at the hotel because I couldn't look anyone in the eye after what we had planned to do." "Where have you been living?" Hope asked, unable to hide the concern in her voice. "With Aunt Ruth in North Charleston," her mother replied. "In a small room, all 3 of us together. It's been humbling." Victoria finally spoke again. "Hope, I also lost Charlotte and all my friends. When word spread about what I had tried to do, no one wanted to know me. I became a social pariah." "And how have you been surviving?" Alexander asked, speaking for the first time since the conversation began. Robert looked at him with a mixture of shame and respect. "Mr. Blackwood, I've been working as a gardener at private homes. Carol cleans offices at night. And Victoria works as a waitress at a small diner. For the first time in my life, I'm earning my own money honestly," Victoria added. "At first I hated it. I felt it was beneath my dignity. But little by little, I discovered something I had never felt before, real satisfaction from earning something myself." Why have you come today? Hope asked softly. Because we found out about your wedding through mutual acquaintances, Robert said. And because we learned about the learning centers you've been building. Hope, we are proud of you. And because, Victoria added, I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to teach me that night. Money obtained by hurting others never brings real happiness. But honest work, genuine relationships, that does. Hope felt tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. And what do you expect from this visit? Nothing, Carol said firmly. We don't expect you to forgive us immediately. We don't expect you to help us financially. We just wanted you to know that we've learned from our mistakes and that we love you. And that we respect your decision to choose Alexander, Robert added, looking at the businessman. Mr. Blackwood, I've heard about your work with the learning centers, about how you treat your employees, about the way you respect and support our daughter. You're the man Hope deserved, and I was a fool not to see it from the beginning. Alexander nodded solemnly. Mr. Sterling, I admire that you came here to apologize. That takes real courage. Could you forgive us someday? Victoria asked directly to Hope. Hope looked at her family, seeing for the first time in years the people they really were beneath all the mistakes they had made. She saw her father, proud but now humble, who had learned that honest work was the only real way to maintain dignity. She saw her mother, who had discovered that a family's love couldn't be bought with stolen money. And she saw her sister, who had finally found her own strength by working for what she had. I already forgave you, Hope said softly. I forgave you a long time ago. But that doesn't mean I can pretend what happened didn't happen. We understand, Victoria said. We don't expect things to go back to how they were before immediately. But maybe, Hope said, looking at Alexander, who nodded with understanding, we could start over. Slowly. With honesty this time. The graduation ceremony for the fifth generation of students from the Alexander and Hope Blackwood Learning Centers was held in the main courtyard of the educational complex that now included elementary, middle, and high school. It was a golden afternoon in May, with the air perfumed by jasmine flowers surrounding the entire campus. Hope, now 28 and more beautiful than ever with happiness radiating from within, addressed the graduates and their families. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress, and her auburn hair was styled in a professional bun that made her look authoritative but approachable. Dear students, she began, her clear voice reaching the last row, when we started these schools 5 years ago, we had a dream. That every child, regardless of their economic background, could have access to quality education that would fill not only their minds with knowledge, but also their hearts with hope. Among the audience, Alexander watched her with the same admiring love he had felt since the first day. Beside him sat Robert, Carol, and Victoria, who applauded with genuine pride. In the front row were Alexander's parents, who had moved to Charleston to be close to their son and daughter-in-law. But you, Hope continued, looking at the 50 students who were graduating, have taught us something we didn't expect. That education isn't just about what adults can give to children, but also about what children can teach adults about kindness, perseverance, and hope. Little Tommy, now 11 years old and the most outstanding student in his class, was called to the stage to receive a special scholarship to continue his secondary education. Tommy, Hope said, handing him the diploma, do you remember when we met? You were a little boy who had hurt his knee. Tommy smiled brightly. Yes, Teacher Hope. And you gave me the picture of the lighthouse. Do you still have it? Tommy took out from his shirt pocket a worn but carefully preserved photo. Always, Teacher Hope. It reminds me that angels sometimes come disguised as teachers. The audience applauded as Alexander watched his wife with infinite love. That night, in their home surrounded by the gardens Hope tended, Alexander asked her. "Do you ever regret exposing the plan?" "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened," she admitted. "But then I see how happy you are, the good work we are doing together, how my family has grown after learning from their mistakes, and I know I made the right decision. Even knowing you risked losing your family. A real family doesn't ask you to do wrong things to prove your loyalty. A real family supports you when you do right, even when it's difficult." Under Charleston's stars, surrounded by the scent of magnolias and the distant sound of jazz from the historic district, Alexander and Hope knew they had found something more valuable than all the gold in the world: true love built on honesty, respect, and the courage to do what's right. And somewhere in the city, Victoria closed her study books after a long day of honest work, smiling for the first time in years with a happiness that no stolen money could have ever bought. The story of the Sisters of Charleston had come to its end, but its lesson would endure forever: that true love and genuine happiness can only be built on foundations of honesty, hard work, and the courage to defend what is right, no matter the personal cost.